moments after the shark's vibrant destruction, Hooper finally surfaces, and then the exhausted Brody is relieved to see him alive. The men share a weak chuckle before assembling a makeshift raft and paddling back to Amity's shore. And then that's it. That is Jaws by Steven Spielberg. This is truly not only a masterclass in film, it is such a simple story, yet terrifying story, and that's mainly due to the camera work of Steven Spielberg. This is his early work. He was about 26 when he was filming this. He had only done a few projects. I think his only major project at that point was the movie Duel. But this is really what put him on the spot as a director, as a person in Hollywood, as a filmmaker. That combined with John Williams' score, which is still haunting to this day, it is no surprise that this caused a increased paranoia around sharks and thalassophilioma. I may be butchering that, but that is the fear of the ocean, of deep water.
And you mentioned John Williams,
Oh yeah,
and his score was just incredible.
And very simple, like I said, mainly relying on the same two notes that grow in intensity, whether in tempo, dynamics.
Spielberg initially laughed at the score when Williams first played it for him. He kind of scoffed at it and said, "Okay, but what do you really have in mind?" But after the movie's success, he later went on to appreciate it and praise it, and jokes on Spielberg. He didn't win Best Director, but John Williams won Best Score. So,
yeah,
who's laughing now?
And
Mr. Spielberg.
This movie, like I said, it caused not only people to fear swimming, not even just in at beaches, but in local pools. But of course, beach attendance was the lowest when Jaws came out, and not many people around those communities were very happy. Very similar to how the people of Amity reacted.
Well, also a lot of the beachgoers left the beach because, as you mentioned, this was a summertime film. Even though it was originally supposed to be released Christmas Day in 1974, they went way over schedule and ended up releasing it the next summer. And not only did that, as you mentioned, increase the fear of sharks, despite the fact that recent studies have shown, and I pulled up something from the University of Florida, saying that there is a 1 in 11.5 million odds of you being bitten by a shark in the first place. It not only increased that phobia, but it did drive away populations because of the fact that they were going to see the movie, not just because of the phobia that resulted from it. But no, when this is truly the pinnacle of shark films. I will say I was expecting more from the ending, because I wasn't necessarily expecting it to end that way. I mean, I expected them to defeat the shark, but watching similar movies in the past, normally, at least from what I've seen, they would come home to this, they would actually, show them coming home to their families or whatnot, or show what they would be doing next, but the movie just ends with them going to shore. There really isn't anything else in that specific movie, but of course, that isn't the only Jaws movie. There are, unfortunately, several.
Yeah, unfortunately after this, it was not only the birth of the Hollywood blockbuster, it also was one of the first to spawn lesser sequels in a franchise. Roy Scheider would reprise his role as Chief Brody in the second one, Jaws 3D, because it played on the gimmick of being 3D, took place at SeaWorld. And then Jaws the Revenge, which is the fourth one, takes place in Jamaica, and the main character is his wife, after both their youngest son and Martin are attacked by sharks and killed.
You want to explain the ending to that one? Because when you first brought that up, you said, "Hey, you got to watch this ending because it's quite the doozy." So
So
explain.
I should say it's called Jaws: The Revenge because the shark holds a grudge.
Ooh.
Yeah. Now, granted, there are some animals that do that. Wasps, certain kind of dirt daubers have a photographic memory, and they do have like the aggressiveness and they can hold a grudge. Uncle Matt, if you're listening to this, I'm talking about you. Uh, but no, the whole idea is that the shark is going to kill all of this family, and Ellen Brody flies down to Jamaica to visit Michael, who is now a marine biologist studying sharks, very similar to Hooper.
Interesting.
The ending of Jaws: The Revenge is they are attracting the shark with some kind of experimental sonar device, and they will ram the end of this yacht into the shark that pops up repeatedly and roars with a very, very awful sound effect. It sounds like a cow giving birth. It is just awful. But then we see glimpses of Martin Brody with his rifle shooting at the shark, even repeating the last line of the film. And Ellen rams the end of the boat into the shark, and it explodes for no reason. To which the same shot of the shark's fin in a pile of gore going deeper into the ocean.
And it's the same exact shot.
It is
too.
the same exact shot.
No difference at all there.
Nope, there are comparisons on YouTube, and it is unfortunate. It's no contest that this is like the standard of shark movies. In the same vein that dinosaur movies, are they going to be as good as Jurassic Park? You know, it is kind of the first one, and it hasn't really been better since.
Mm-hmm.
Have there been good shark movies? Debatable. However, it's really up to personal taste. Jaws is a trailblazer, not only for shark movies, but again, the blockbuster. This was one of the movies that first capitalized on marketing. Jaws T-shirts, posters, which have become, famous. The idea of a nude woman swimming with a shark's head rapidly approaching with bold red text is iconic, to say the least. And it's no surprise that the movie did have some differentiations from the book. In the book, Ellen Brody, who's Chief Brody's wife, and Matt Hooper actually knew each other from when they were kids, and they end up having an affair in the book. Hooper also dies in the book. The shark eats him.
Rest in peace.
Yeah. Pieces, more like.
Oh, yeah.
But Peter Benchley, who wrote the book, he was actually the one who wrote the screenplay, and he makes a cameo during the chaos at the 4th of July beach. He is seen as a news reporter talking about the situation at the beach. Now, to respond to your comment about the ending, there's nothing that really needs to be added. The shark blew up. Hooper and Brody lived. There's nothing that really needs to be said after that, until Universal decided that we can make a sequel. But think about it in the same vein of Jurassic Park, because Jurassic Park, the first one, has a very similar ending. They get on the helicopter, they get off the island, and they just go away. It doesn't see the kids going home to their parents, or them getting off the helicopter. It's they lived, they survived, and that's it. I suppose the ending is the credits over the shoreline, and it's sunny, and it's clean, it's bright out. That's pretty much it.
I wasn't saying that the ending wasn't ideal. I just said I wasn't expecting it to end like that.
Yeah,
It was a good ending. It's just I just wasn't expecting it.
it right, but in terms of wanting more, like what more is there?
I didn't want a sequel. I didn't want
no one
countless sequels. Yeah.
No one did.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, maybe they did, and then when they watched it, they were like, "Nah, never
the
mind."
business people did.
Oh, of course, because that would
Uh,
just give them more money.
Yep.
But you did mention about, or just talked about how different this movie could have been, because it was based off of the book written a couple years prior. There's a couple more differences that I want to point out. The mayor, Larry Vaughn, in the book had ties to the mafia, which, I mean, said it seeing as Amity Island was originally set in Long Island, New York, that makes a little more sense. Quint in the movie became a survivor of the USS Indianapolis, which he was not in the book. And they also changed the cause of the shark's death from extensive wounds to a scuba tank explosion. The director had estimated the final script had a total of 27 scenes that were not in the book. And, of course, Amity was relocated and all that. So I think you mentioned this, the new location of Amity Island in the movie was near, kind of it was more of a New England town than in Long Island.
Well, it was filmed in Martha's Vineyard.
Yes.
Which I believe is Upper New England. It's not Long Island.
But the thing that really inspired the changes were the characters themselves in the book. Because Spielberg even said that, before he greenlit the project, he read the book. And because he thought that the characters in it were so unlikable, he was rooting for the shark. Another review from Michael A. Rogers of Rolling Stone said, "None of the humans are particularly likable or interesting," and said that the shark was his favorite character. So, considering that, from the point of view of Spielberg, you gotta change something around to make the characters more likable. Maybe that's why they got rid of the Hooper affair, maybe to make him more likable. And, of course, writing is a big part of that as well. Mm-hmm. And another fun fact, Spielberg wasn't even the original director of the film. A guy by the name of Dick Richards was the movie's first director. And you wouldn't believe how he was fired. He told the studio that he wanted this to be about a whale and not a shark. With them saying that they were not making Moby Dick and they would not work with someone who did not know the difference between a whale and a shark.
Well, that's a hell of a self-plug there.
It really is. It really is. But, this movie could have been entirely different, as we've seen in weeks past with, Forrest Gump. These kinds of movies that were based off of books have these necessary changes that in the end made the movies much more popular than the book would ever dream of becoming. Mm-hmm. There was also some real-life tension between some of the actors, and we both saw in our research, particularly between Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss. Here's some stories here. Robert Shaw was a noted alcoholic, and he was very much an alcoholic when they filmed this movie. And he made a lot of scenes with him tough, and at one point Richard Dreyfuss had enough and threw his drink into the nearby ocean, and that was a bad move because Shaw ended up bullying Dreyfuss throughout the entire filming, and eventually he stormed off in anger.
Is that why Richard Dreyfuss is so bitter nowadays?
Yeah, probably.
Wow.
I mean, maybe there's some other reasons, but I think that's the catalyst to it all is that Robert Shaw was mean to him. I don't know. But
he wasn't in the sequel, that's why.
Exactly. But the scene where they were all drunk and Quint recounts his tales of the USS Indianapolis, Robert Shaw actually intended to do the scene while intoxicated because that's what the scene called for. So he drank a lot and actually tried to do it while under the influence, and none of it could be used. It's kind of like I would imagine it was like the Orson Welles outtakes from that one commercial he did, where he was doing this wine commercial. I gotta show you this video, and he drank the wine every take. So he would just get even more drunk, and it was hilarious. I hope it was like that because that would have been funny, but that's just what's in my head when I read that out loud. But he felt remorse for this, and after that day of filming, he called Spielberg and said, "You know what? I'm sorry. Can we try this again and do it when I'm sober?" The next day they did it when he was sober, one take. Yeah, so
Well, when you talk about
don't drink, kids.
when you talk about behind the scenes tension, no one takes the cake other than the shark. Now, the shark was a large mechanical shark that was built that would be submerged in the water, and it went through production hell because it would just keep breaking down. To which the crew, because of Spielberg, would refer it to as Bruce. And Spielberg said, "I named it Bruce after my lawyer because it was such a pain in my ass." And, you know, despite the constant failures, the camera work of the POV shots of the shark really were to make up for that. It was going to be more shark involved, but because of the constant breakdowns, they couldn't do that. However, this works a lot better because the less you see of the monster, the more tension it builds. You kind of see that with Sam Raimi in The Evil Dead when he's running in the woods, dragging the camera as the spirit. Or even in the Tremors movie, they do that kind of same thing. When the worm is under the ground, it's just a camera floating above. So it's that principle of less is more. And of course, Bruce being an inside joke would spawn another iconic shark named Bruce in Finding Nemo.
And speaking of pain, because you mentioned that it was a pain in his ass, well, we have to talk about some of the risks that these actors took while filming. In the beginning of the film, Brody is slapped by the mother of, I believe it was the dead boy, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
Miss Kittner.
Yes. Well, as it turns out, because the actress who played Mrs. Kittner could not do a fake slap, all of those were real. So she actually really slapped Roy Scheider, and it took 17 takes to get it right, meaning he was slapped 17 times, and Roy Scheider in an interview said that it was one of the most painful moments in his acting career.
Now that's dedication.
Yeah, exactly. The risks you gotta take when you involve yourself in the film industry, ladies and gentlemen. And speaking of Martin Brody, you want to know who was considered for that role before Roy Scheider? I'll give you a hint. He former president of the NRA.
Charlton Heston?
Yes, sir. He was considered for the role, but he was too heroic. Think about that, because in some of his previous roles, he was, larger than life and could really defeat any evil foe.
So
they wanted somebody who wasn't as, didn't have that kind of track record, so they picked Roy Scheider.
So let me get this straight. He can uncover a conspiracy where the government is turning dead people into food, and he can also escape the Planet of the Apes, but he can't fight a shark because that's too heroic.
Well, he was too heroic.
Darn.
They wanted this to be a challenge. They didn't want somebody with the expertise of Mr. Heston. They wanted Roy Scheider to be Martin Brody.
I don't know if I could see him as Brody, because Brody doesn't really know what's going on. Again,
could you see him as Quint possibly? I mean,
that's what I was gonna say.
Robert Shaw does
Quint.
a fantastic job. I mean, really, I think he was the best choice, as was Scheider, and I think Richard Dreyfuss does a magnificent job as well.
I mean, his monologues when he is in that town hall meeting after he scratches that chalkboard, he delivers one of the most memorable monologues about capturing this fish. And of course, the very strange characterization where he's like, I don't know. He doesn't sound like he's drunk, but he somehow is still slurring his speech. You know, where he's
Right.
like, you get the head, the tail, the whole damn thing.
And Robert Shaw wasn't even that old when he was in this film. He was only in his late 40s. So the makeup department did a good job making him look older. And an unfortunate fact about Robert Shaw, he did pass away 3 years after that movie. At the young age of 51, he unfortunately suffered a heart attack while in Ireland. So rest in peace to that man. He's actually British. So I mean, I that it does a good job of not making his native accent noticeable. He does a good job portraying an American character. But yeah, and as I said before, this film won 3 Oscars: one for best sound, best film editing, and best score, all of which they really deserved. There was no nominations on the for any of the actors. Scheider, Dreyfuss, Robert Shaw, they didn't get nominated. Spielberg, Spielberg might have been nominated, but he didn't win. It was nominated for Best Picture, but it lost out. Gage, you want to tell our audience what movie it lost out to, if you know?
I actually don't know this one.
It's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, starring Jack Nicholson.
Oh man, okay.
That's
another good one.
It is.
That's a matchup.
It also went up against Barry Lyndon, Dog Day Afternoon, Nashville for that nomination. So they were up against some.
That's a pretty good year.
Oh, very good year. And so they were up against some real firepower. And so just before you say, "Oh, they got robbed," well, it's understandable, if they weren't up against such good films as these. But you said in our America episode last week that you believe that Shawshank Redemption was robbed of the best Oscar against Forrest Gump.
Well, 1994 was also a very stacked year.
Exactly.
I mean, you had the trio of Forrest Gump, Shawshank Redemption, and then you also had Pulp Fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe also The Lion King was nominated. I could be wrong. You can fact check me on that.
Sounds a little early. I think it was like 92. I can check that.
I'm pretty sure it was 94. But you get what I'm saying.
Right.
This stacked year, and there's always contention among nominees. I mean, look at this past year with Oppenheimer, the Barbie movie. So many great films that were nominated. 2019 with Parasite, Joker. Again, a massive amount of films. I mean, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So much contention and choices. A lot of really great films, though. But at the end of the day, as they say in Highlander, there can only be one.